Good morning. Well, you're probably reading this at school, but I'm recording it now, and it's morning. Um, when we left off, it's they had picked that hemlock poison, and 3 children had died because they had eaten it, and Hattie felt absolutely terrible, and it was super extremely sad. And then, but they had to have the funeral and just keep going. So that is where we are. Says, I don't know what day this is. We've crossed the South Platte. I've not felt like riding until now. This river is nearly a mile wide and so shallow, lots of folks just walk across it. That is a great relief to me. Pepper and I challenged Gideon and some other boys to a race, but we were soon slowed down by our wet skirts. When Gideon saw us struggling to run in the high-waisted water, he stepped between us, took our hands, and helped pull us across. It was the first time any of us had laughed for 2 whole days. Once ashore, we flopped down in the warm sand and stared up at the sky. It was such a lovely blue that I felt for that one moment happy again. Later. Now that we're in the North Platte River Valley, the air feels dry and thin. My lips are so chapped that they bleed when I talk. The only thing to do is dip our fingers into the bucket of axle grease and rub our lips every hour or so. It smells bad. It tastes bad, and the blowing dust sticks to it. Remember what an axle is? An axle is the stick that holds the 2 wheels onto the wagon. Axle grease is what you put on where the wheels attach so that the wheels spin well. That's gross. Gotta do what you gotta do, though. It feels like we must be halfway to Oregon, but Tall Joe says, no, we've only gone 500 miles. He also said the worst part of the trail is still yet to come. Does he mean more rivers to cross? Will there be Native Americans? I'm afraid to ask what he's talking about. The Andersons' wagon had an accident when we climbed up the windless hill, and we're heading down the other side. It was so steep that at the top of the hill, we unhitched the teams and led them down separately. Then we chained the wheels to keep them from turning. Also, we cut small trees and tied them behind each wagon for drag to slow it down as the men lowered them with ropes and pulleys. That's why this place is named Windlass Hill. It took hours and hours. I was nervous watching the men strain so hard, their heels dug into sand, their palms bleeding from the ropes. Ma and some other ladies tore their petticoats and their into rags to wrap around the men's hands. What happened with the Anderson wagon is that their front axle hit a stump, which caused the smaller rope to snap. Before anyone could help, that wagon flipped over and over and over, landing in complete splinters at the bottom of the hill. Folks were screaming, but it was just the shock of seeing such an accident. Nobody was actually hurt. Thank God Mrs. Anderson and her daughters were watching from the top of the hill, for they had climbed out earlier to lighten the load. The only belongings that they could rescue were some clothes and blankets that were strewn over the rocks when their trunks were split open. There were a few tools that they could save as well. Aunt June and Uncle Tim right away invited their family to share their own wagon and supplies for the rest of the journey. We also will share. Hazel, Holly, Laurel, and Olive will take turns riding with us. I don't mind giving up my very small spot inside as it's hot from the sun beating down on the canvas top. I am tired of the bumping and rattling. Besides, something always tips over. Yesterday it was Ma's dresser, bureau. Things are packed in so tight that the bouncing makes the ropes fray. My opinion is it's not safe to be in the wagon anyways. 2 other wagons got stumped today, so those families will have to double up as well. Stumped is the axle hitting a stump. There's enough wreckage to completely build a whole new wagon rig, but there's no time to do it, so we just keep moving. Mules and oxen will go to the others who need them. Ash Hollow. The Platte River is split into 2, the Platte Valley is split into 2, so now our trail is along the North Platte River. Our reward for making it down the hill is the most beautiful campsite I've seen. It's called Ash Hollow because of so many thick, shady ash trees. There's a spring with fresh, icy water so we can fill up our barrels and such. As everywhere we look, there's firewood and good pasture for the animals. It is absolutely peaceful. And Ma said, oh, Charles, can't we just stay here? Can't we just stay here forever? A few years ago, some immigrants did exactly that. A family built themselves a cabin, they plowed a field, and they're so friendly to us. They've offered to post our letters with the next travelers heading back to Missouri. Many of us quick wrote to our friends. I tore out a sheet of paper from this very journal, and I sent Becky a drawing of a hemlock, telling her everything that happened. The moon is so full, so I'm writing this by its light as I sit near the wagon. There are hundreds of campfires tonight, all of us singing. Ma is walking along a creek nearby with Mrs. Anderson, who's been silent for days. Ma says she's grieving, that she finally realizes little Cassia is gone and that her grave is so far away, in a lonely place along a river that we'll never see again. It's so sad. I'm so sad for her. This makes me watch Benny and Jake so much more closely, for I don't know how Ma and Pa and me could go on if they become lost or died somehow. There are Indians, about 20, camped nearby. That sight of them makes me so nervous that my stomach hurts and I feel that vomity feeling. Some women came near, holding their hands out, talking in Native American language. Their deerskin dresses have tiny beads, beautifully sewn all along their sleeves. Their hair is braided over their shoulders, and one of them wore a basket on her back with her baby inside, a beautiful dark-haired baby with dark eyes, and they accepted Ma's corn cakes without a smile. I asked Tall Joe why they were begging from us. They ain't begging, he said. They're hospitable people, and if they're passing through our land... And if they were passing through our land, they would give us a gift. They're just asking for our gift. They look like beggars to me, but they're not making any trouble. As a matter of fact, one of the women did something really nice. She saw Mrs. Anderson off by herself, crying, and she walked over to her with a square of deer skin the size of a plate. On it, several chunks of cooked meat. She picked up a piece and put it to Mrs. Anderson's lips, nodding for her to eat. The woman then pointed to the little Anderson girls playing in the stream, then motioned with her hands and mouth like she was eating. Finally, Mrs. Anderson accepted the gift. I think she understood that the Indian woman wanted her to take nourishment for the sake of caring for her little daughters. How nice. Later, Aunt June wears a smock dress now on account of she's getting a bigger belly. I helped her and Ma do laundry. The stream was busy with ladies talking and working, and by the afternoon the bushes were covered with petticoats, shirts, calicos, blankets, all drying in the hot sun. Remember, calico fabric is like little floral, flowery fabric. The youngest children ran naked into the water, and Pepper and I loosened our braids and stripped down to our camisoles. How good the cold water felt pouring over my face and through my hair, and how good it felt to wash away so much dust. We swam downstream along the bank where willows made a canopy of shade. It was shallow enough to sit on the sandy bottom, water up to our shoulders. The only problem was we'd have to dry these clothes later, but that's okay. It felt too good to care. Another thing is that fat lady came over, remember her? And she brung Ma a fresh pie, mince pie, it turns out. I hurried off to watch from the trees. She must eat 10 pies a day, that lady. She's that huge, I reckon. Next day. In the far distance, the prairie and low hills are black. Thought there must have been a fire, but Tall Joe said, no, that's buffalo. Thousands and thousands and thousands of buffalo. After supper, I sat by the fire to mend Benny's blanket. He laid next to me in the dirt, talking about this and that, and then suddenly, fast asleep. I like the way he folds into my arms when I carry him to bed. It feels cozy. Later that day, we are starting to find buffalo droppings, and Tall Joe says, where there's buffaloes, there's Indians. Hunters leave the wagons every morning to look for game. They bring down two buffalo near enough to the trail so folks can see them being skinned and butchered. Jake went with some older boys to watch, but I stayed behind. Aunt June was resting in her wagon with Olive and Laurel, who are 3 and 4 years old. To make room inside, Uncle Tim pulled out several sacks of bacon and flour. It's so much work to pack and unpack that at noon Pa just lies flat in the dirt to rest. He's sound asleep before his eyes even close. We're camped next door to Aunt June with a tarp stretched between the tops of our wagons for shade. I saw Mrs. Kinker wave, "Hattie!" "Hattie, dear," she said, "may I borrow one of your mother's tablecloths, please? Mine is soiled and Mr. Kinker's ready for lunch." I felt stiff and emotionless towards her. "I'm afraid not, Mrs. Kinker." My aunt's voice came from her wagon. "Hattie Campbell, we are not a family to refuse hospitality. Help Mrs. Kinker take what she needs." Well, by the time Mrs. Kinker had snooped around, we were quite a bit lighter. She took our lovely lace tablecloth that grandmother had made, 5 doilies. That's like a mat, a table mat. What do you call that? Yeah, to protect. It goes underneath your plate. I'm forgetting the word. a tea cozy, and one English teacup. She also grabbed one of Ma's brown calico skirts and draped it over her arm, but I snatched it back. Our eyes locked, and then finally she turned away. "Thank you, dear," she called over her shoulder, her arms too full of our stuff to wave at me. Jake was so excited to tell about the buffalo skinning, and he pulled my hand to go see, but I was so bothered about Mrs. Kinker that I wouldn't go. When Ma came back, I told her, but she said the same thing as Aunt June. We must share. This makes me mad. I like to share with nice folks, not those that are taking advantage. I'm afraid if I say anything more about Mrs. Kinker, I'll sound like a wretched old lady, so that's all for now.